Hey guys, let's talk about the M32 mixing board here. And what we're going to do is cover just the main topics of how to get a signal to the board and how to get everything set up on that channel so that things are done correctly here. So first thing is, most of the time you guys won't have to mess with this, but how to get a signal into the board. So there's a bunch of inputs on the stage down there, a bunch of stage boxes that go over to the rack, and then they hit a patch bay, and then out of the patch bay it goes into the DL16s, which are your digital input boxes, and I'll show you those later. But and then those signals come up to the mixing board with a Cat5 cable. Okay, and so what you have to do is you got to tell the mixing board, hey, I want to send these signals to these channels. So that's the routing button here. Okay, so in this routing button, let me see if I can get this to focus here. There we go. So in this routing screen, you can see that I have AES50A 1 through 8 going to inputs 1 through 8. And what that means is the inputs on the digital input box on the stage are getting sent to right over here, this first 8, this bank of 8. And you can see, if we get closer here, you can see that like the kick drum says A. That means it's getting a feed from the AES50A. You can see that back here that we're using. See where it says AES50A 1 through 8. That's what's being sent to these first 8 channels right here. And so with the routing, you can see that the next 8 channels, inputs 9 through 16, are receiving 9 through 16 from the stage box, and then, or I should say the digital input box, and then 17 through 24, again, it's 1 to 1. The numbers match. But then when you get to inputs 25 through 32, it says local 1 through 8. You can see that right here. Local 1 through 8. And what that means, and then we also have aux inputs over here. What that means is on this bank right here, what we're saying is this last set, 25 through 32, are getting their feeds from the physical inputs on the back of this mixing board. And you can see if I get closer here, it says input 1 and input 2. It doesn't say A like the other bank did. See if I switch back over like drums. Remember it says A because it's getting them from that AES50A. So the reason why I did that is because I have these receivers, these wireless microphone receivers, and their signal comes out of those receivers into the back of the board, which is back here. So we needed to change the routing so that the signal would show up where we needed it to show up. And the last bank over here is this auxiliary. So if I go down to what I've labeled, it says aux in, but I've labeled it miscellaneous. If we go over there, what we have are things like, you know, the iPod left and right, and a feed from the video, and you can see that they have like input 8 there, and then we're getting an aux feed in here, which is a separate input on the back of the board. See, there's their aux input right here from the iPod. So anyway, that's basically how you get signals routed to where you want them to go in the board. Okay, so now let's talk about the next important thing. Let's just pick a channel here. So we're going to deal with the kick drum, which is right here, this channel 2. And anytime you are making adjustments to a channel, the first thing you need to do is hit the select button up here. That tells the board which channel we're working with, and then all of these controls are working with that specific channel. Okay, so in order, here are the most important things we need to do. First thing we do is go up to this configure and preamp area, and what this is a place where all the fundamental things need to be done for this channel. So first thing is we've got this 48 volts here, and this is for if you have a condenser microphone. The kick drum is not a condenser, so the 48 volts is turned off. But if you did have a condenser mic, we do have some on the hi-hat. We've got another one for overheads, And some of the Beta Shure mics are actually condenser mics as well. So the mic will not work without this power. So you have to know if you're dealing with a condenser mic, okay? The second thing, most important thing, is this gain adjustment. I'm going to hit view here, and if we go over right here, we can see that this meter right here will show us our gain coming in. And so you would make an adjustment on this knob, this gain knob right here, to get the gain, the input, so that it's coming up, you know, somewhere between -12 and -6 is a good area to leave enough headroom for your signal. So that's the first thing you want to do, is make sure that your signal is coming in at about that level. And what you want to do is ask the musicians to play at about 80 to 90% of how loud they're going to play. All right? So the next thing that we do is there's this low cut setting. I'm going to go ahead and it's on the kick drum, but I'm going to show it to you by pressing the EQ button here. So I hit view, and now I can see what the low cut is doing to the signal. And what I'm doing is cutting out all of these low frequencies, because you get too much low frequencies in your mix, and oops, let me go back here. Too much low frequencies in your mix, and the mix gets muddy. It just sounds really boomy and woofy down there, and it's just doesn't sound very good. So what we're doing at the beginning of even setting up this channel is taking out some low frequency information that we don't need. Okay? So those are the first things you want to do when you are setting up a channel. Okay? From there, and I guess I should mention the home page. Let's go to the home page. What we can see on the home page here is how the signal is being processed. So the first thing that happens is it hits this input, and you've got the 48 volts if you want it. You've got a low cut, and then you've got the gate. And the next thing in line is, if you put an insert in here, you can insert an effect of some sort if you wanted to. That would be next. Now currently we don't have an insert, so it's blank. But then you have an EQ, then you have dynamics, and then it hits the fader, the output fader, and then it leaves out the left and right main bus. Okay, so what I want to show you here is you can actually change the order of where this thing hits. So right now the dynamics hit post EQ, but if I wanted to, I could change that so that the dynamics were pre-EQ'd. You see how that changed? Dynamics are now ahead of the EQ. Now typically you don't want to do that. You want to leave it here, and the reason for that is you don't want the compressor to be triggered by frequency information that you've cut out. So if I did this, if I left it dynamics first, the dynamics would be triggered, like say you had a compressor there, the dynamics would be triggered by frequencies that I'm not even wanting to hear. So what we do is we take those frequencies out first with the EQ, so that only the frequencies that we want to hear are what's actually triggering the dynamics. So that's the reason for that order. There are some times where it makes sense to change that order, but we're not going to get into that right now. Okay, so the next thing is dynamics. So if we come over here, we've got the concept of a gate, and we have a compressor here as well. So I'm going to start with the gate. I'm going to hit view on this, and we'll go to the screen. And what a gate does is it turns the signal off or down when no signal is coming through. Okay, so right now you can see it's being attenuated by about 30 decibels, and you can see that range right here, that little range knob. I'm pushing the signal down 30 decibels here. So that's what that's doing, and I'm doing that so that the kick drum, I don't hear the kick drum mic when, say, a tom drum is hit. We only want to hear the kick when a kick is hit. So that's why we use a gate. Okay, and I'm not going to get into all the different settings of it. That's something you guys can look up and learn how to do it, and a lot of the settings are already in place, so you've got great sound going already. But that's a gate, okay, and you can turn that gate on or off just by hitting this button here. Now let's move to compressor. I'm going to hit view. You can see that we have some compression set here, and what that does is it keeps the dynamics of the signal under control. So if you've got, if I left this compressor off, it would be really loud the instant a kick drum was hit, and then it would drop very fast as well. And so what we're trying to do is squash that initial attack down so that we can hear more of the resonance of the drum shell. So it leaves a lot more room, a lot more headroom in your final mix as well. So if you compress all of the signals coming in just a little bit, you save a lot of room for things to have space here in what would be the master bus. You can see the meters there for the master, okay? So anyway, we've got some compression going on there. And then the next section here I want to look at is EQ. See the equalizer here? All right, now I'm going to hit View on EQ. And this is where we tone shape. This is where we decide, okay, what's a good tone for this instrument? And for a kick drum, what we're doing right now is we're taking out the really, really low stuff, leaving a nice area here for the kick to come through, the low side of the kick. And then there's this little divot here that we're taking out, and that's probably because it sounds a little thuddy. Kind of sounds like we're hearing too much of the head being beaten. It kind of sometimes it can sound like a basketball bouncing on concrete. So we're taking out some of that frequency, and it looks like the beater, one that beats the head, it was a little too clicky. So we took out a little bit out in this area about 2K, where it can sound like a little too clicky. So there's an example of what we're doing, but the most important thing is to notice that we have frequency band 1, 2, 3, and 4. We've got 4 bands to work with, and we have our shelf here, our low cut, rather, I should say, being taken out there. So how you select those is just like this. So you can select the low, low mid, and high. So once you select them, then that's the frequency that you're dealing with. And you can change the frequency here. You can change the amount you're adding or taking away of that frequency. And then this is called width, they call it. Another name for this is Q. And this is how wide on the left or the right of the frequency, how far out are we affecting it. So if you look at this little bell curve here, that's basically showing us, you know, is it a tight bell curve or is it a wide bell curve? And that's how you adjust that right there. And you can see that effect, let's say right here. So we kind of have a medium bell curve on this one, but notice how this one is wider. So if I select number 3, which would be this high mid, you can see that it's much wider than this low mid. See that? So there's a basic overview of EQ, and I wanted to kind of tell you the theory here, the methodology behind EQing. You'll notice we do a lot more taking away than we do adding. And the reason for that is, again, we're trying to save headroom in our master bus, our master meters here. So the more you can take away of frequencies that you don't want to hear anyway, the better the tone is going to sound and the more room you're going to leave for your final mix. Okay? Okay, so we've covered, just to kind of review, we've covered how to set your gain, how to make sure if you've got a condenser mic, you've got to give it some phantom power so it can work correctly. We've covered low cut, taking out that low area there that we don't want to use, don't want to hear anyway. And you set that with this frequency knob here. And then we moved on to talk about dynamics, gating, and EQ. So if I go back to the home page, let's see that overview again. You can see, again, that we don't have any phantom power. We do have a low cut engaged. We do have a gate. We do have an EQ that happens before the compressor. We have the compressor, then we have the fader, and then it goes out the left and right. So that's a quick overview of how to operate, how to get a signal into the board where you want it, on which channel you want it, and how to process that signal to get it to where you want to go. There's one more important thing I should mention here. How do you get it to the main left and right bus? You can see right there. It says main bus. If I deselect this, it's not going to the main bus and we won't hear it. So it's important that that main stereo is selected. And that is what sends it to the master bus, which is right here, this master fader. And that's how you make sure that we can hear it. Okay? So there's a quick overview of getting a signal in and processing it. And you know what? Let's go ahead and move on to the next thing here. We're talking about DCAs here. This is it's called a DCA, and how you select that is right over here. See, it says DCA group 1 through 8. And I should mention while I'm here in this fader layer, anything you select on this side, if you can imagine an imaginary line right here, anything you select on this side will show up on these 8 faders right here. Anything you select on this side will show up on these 8 faders right here. And there's a neat little trick where you can select 2 at the same time. Notice I've got 1 through 8 and 9 through 16. If I press them at the same time, the board changes and then shows me all of those in a row. So now I've got, let me focus this real quick. Now I've got the drums followed by the band instruments. I've got guitars here and the keys here. Or I can go back over to here and say, you know what, I want to see the DCAs on this side. So I hit DCAs and notice the drum instruments stayed where they are, and then we've put DCAs over here. Now let's talk about DCAs. Think of a DCA as simply like a remote control. No audio goes through these DCA faders. All they do is it's basically like a shortcut for controlling all of these in one shot. So you have these faders set at the ratio that you want to hear them. So you want to hear the kick kind of loud, snare right under it, hi-hat kind of lower, 2 toms, and you've got the overheads here. So this ratio is what you like to hear. If you want to take all of these down at the same time, it's kind of hard to do with your fingers. So what you do is you assign a DCA here, which is what we've done. We have a drums, let me do this. There we go. We have a drums DCA, and now this one fader is what controls, focus again. One fader here is what controls all of these in the same ratio that they are. So it's like taking all your fingers on them and moving them down all at the same time in the same ratio. So that's how a DCA works. And let's see how we assign a DCA. It's super simple. So I'm going to back out here, refocus. All right. So if I select this DCA knob, you can see that all of these select buttons on the left here are blue, showing me that these are the things that are assigned to this DCA. If I change fader layers here, and I go to 9 through 16, and I've got these right here, and if I select this DCA, you can tell they're not assigned. They didn't light up. That's because they're assigned, some of them are assigned to this one. So if I select this one, you can see that these guitars are linked to this DCA. So it's super simple. All you do is select this and at the same time press another button. See that? How that lit up? Now that's assigned to this DCA. I'm going to deselect that because I don't want my keys and guitars to be on the same DCA. So it's just that simple to set up a DCA. All right? So I think that's a really good overview of how to operate the main functions of the board here. And I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye for now, and we'll see you guys on the next video.